Welcome back to the NS Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about something today about being more thoughtful. Before I do that, I'm actually curious at how many ladies and how many gentlemen listen to this podcast. So drop a comment below or shoot me a DM on Instagram at Nick Schiffer. I'm curious at how many, what the split is, and even furthermore, what specifically you like us to dig into on these podcasts, these conversations. We have a lot of interesting conversations outside of this podcast that I try to rein back. Doug does a great job trying to hone that in, but I really want to dig into some really specific things on how it relates to the business and then how it relates to building a home, whether you're building with us, another builder, somewhere else in the country, or even local. I want this to be helpful. So make sure you drop a comment below. If you want to book some one-on-one time with me to talk about a particular project or something in your business, there's a link below to do that as well. nickschiffer.com. Let's get into it. So being more thoughtful in the architectural, in the benefits of good architecture. There are so many benefits of good architecture. Let's just leave it at that. No, there's an enormous amount of time and effort that goes into really great architecture. And oftentimes we see that is something that we try to scale back on. Whether it's, let's not spend that much money on the design, and let's instead of spending the money on the design, let's put it into the fixtures and finishes or appliances or something like that. And I just think that, as I continue to grow as a builder, and as I continue to grow as a home builder and working with clients, every successful project that we've ever done, or actually, let me just rephrase that, the sliding scale of how successful a job went directly relates to how much time we spend on good architecture and good design. Now, I just had a conversation on the Modern Craftsman podcast with a builder down in Australia, and he literally ripped the words out of my mouth where he was or the words out of my brain. He was talking about how he is involved so heavily in the design of the homes that they build. And not only is he designing the projects, but he's putting together the pieces necessary to put that home together. And for example, he talks about placing concrete for this epic build he did, and having steel literally show up the day after it's placed, and then 10 days later you have a structure that's completely erected because they put all of the thought into the planning. I think about our Rhode Island project. It is an owner architect, and we have spent over a year going back and forth with design on this home. It's not a very big home. The footprint of the home is under 2,000 square feet. There's as you'll see on our site visit series, you'll see how complex some of the steel is, and then the wall assemblies and things like that. But my point is it didn't need to take a year. It was more about kind of just taking a slow speed through design to make sure that we were getting the details right. But what that is allowing us to do is to really think this stuff through and figure out, what is the end result, and let's work backwards from there. And the moment that you do that, and you don't have this mentality of, I'm going to, get my job done, and then the next trade can take it from there and figure out what they need to do. And instead you're thinking all the way to the paint, like the finish paint, and then backing up. What's before that? For us, it's plaster, or in your case, if you're listening, it might be drywall. And it's like thinking about what the painter needs to do a quality paint job. It needs to have good drywall. Otherwise, they're basically completing the drywall scope and then going into the next. But that goes all the way back to the foundation. If you set, figuratively and literally the foundation for the project, and it's accurate and it's good and it's well thought out and the elevations are meant, then the framer can come in and set his sills, and he's not worrying about trying to correct an unlevel, top of foundation wall. It's, you have to look at that and figure out what it takes to set a job up for success. And even before foundation, it's thinking about all the details that go into that foundation. Now, you can slap a foundation in the ground and then go through the motions, and then where, if you need a penetration through the wall, all right, get the coring machine out, core through the foundation wall, and we'll pop the water in there. I think about Rhode Island, where it's like, well, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to adjust the elevation of the height so that we could bring in the invert of the sewer at the right height, so we didn't need an injector pump. And we're playing with inches at this point. So we actually adjusted the house elevation up. I think it was less than 6 inches. But that gave us the opportunity to eliminate an ejector pump. It doesn't change the aesthetic of the home. It doesn't affect the overall height of the home because it's a single-story home. But we were able to think that process through by confirming the invert, figuring out where that line was going to come in, make sure it also didn't impact our waterproofing, where it was coming in underneath the footing, all of those things. It's the thought process. We weren't just relying on where it was and we were just building around it. Same thing with our drainage going out. It's like we're thinking about where does that leave the foundation, and rather than doing it after the fact or not, or just kind of coring what is necessary, we're thinking those details out in advance. And for us, and going back to the relationship to the gentleman in Australia, we're doing concrete now, but we're already through design. We have full shop drawings and coordinated shop drawings with steel. Now those coordinated shop drawings with steel were reflected back on our structural concrete drawings. And there's things like setting base plates. I remember having a conversation. It's like, well, yes, you could go back and drill and anchor your bolts and then put the base plates in the footings, and then the steel guy could come out and set his steel. But why drill and anchor them when you can set them in wet concrete? Now, someone had corrected me online saying that wet set means we're setting them in wet concrete, and then the aggregate doesn't get around them. You're pushing it out of the way, which that's not what I meant. What I'm saying is that they would be attached to the formwork, and the concrete gets placed around it. So, yes, that is more difficult for someone such as the form guy. Now he needs to locate and put these anchors in the right spot, because if they're in the wrong spot, then they're just null and void. You're cutting them off, and now you're drilling and setting them in epoxy anyway, which is why he recommended let's just drill and epoxy them, because it's just they'll go exactly where they need to go. But the point is like, all right, well, I'm not asking the concrete guy to locate these, because it's like that's not his specialty. His specialty is getting formwork up, rebar tied, placing concrete, stripping concrete. Yes, he could in fact measure them and put the plates in the right spot, and it might be 100% accurate. But that's again not his specialty. Instead, we're going to work with the surveyor. The surveyor knows how to locate this stuff. They have the equipment. They have the know-how. They can set elevations. They can make sure these are in the right spot. So instead of, again, going back to drilling or epoxying or asking someone that isn't comfortable laying this stuff out, we're bringing in the professional that does know how to lay this stuff out. And they're going to lay the plates out and then make sure they're in the right spot. So when that concrete is placed and we pull the formwork off, when the steel shows up that's already in fabrication, we know it's going to be in the right spot. Or at least the chances are much higher, because we're working with someone that was comfortable laying these things out and making sure that they are coordinated with where our steel needs to be. Now, I said there was an owner architect. That owner architect is working really closely with structural. She's handling the architectural and then also mechanical. So not only is the steel coordinated with the concrete, but the steel is also coordinated with all the framing, to the point where we have these 3D framing drawings, and we can basically manipulate the model and understand how the framing was designed and how it was, assumed to be built. Now, the reason that framing design has been done so thoroughly, where we could literally get a piece count, a quantity count. We could even pull lengths of studs and have all this stuff pre-cut, which, side note, we're exploring and would love to, cut waste down and do that. We've done things like advanced framing, so we're reducing the amount of lumber. Like we're making these conscious decisions to really be really thoughtful, going back, making sure that we're thinking this stuff through to a level that, yes, it's more time up front, but we net a better result in all these different ways. I just alluded to the fact that, okay, if we can pre-cut these studs, that's less waste, because we can maximize the amount of the amount of lumber that we are using, rather than ordering material and having a bunch of cutoffs. We can go through that, and oftentimes when you're pre-cutting, it's through a program that figures out what's the maximum, or what's the most efficient use of each piece of lumber. I'm going to give a shout out to Mike over at Cape Cod Panel, who I got to tour their facility, and that's exactly what it is. They're pre-cutting these studs, and they had done a whole house, and they had a 55-gallon bucket of offcuts, and that was it. Basically, it said, all right, the computer basically figured out every stud that they needed, every length, and then said, all right, you have 14-foot material. This is how we're going to cut it for the least amount of waste possible. And I think that's a great use of time. It's a better use of material, and then thus, if you're using less material, it's less costly. There's all these benefits, but it takes all of the thought up front. Now, I quickly touched on the fact that we're also coordinating with mechanical. I don't know why I keep playing with it. We got to get rid of this table. I just sit here and put my fingers in it. We're also doing this with mechanical, so we're working with. And shout out to the guys over at Hayes O'Neill who are working with structural on us, and then we're working with Ross Chathui at T2 Engineering for HVAC and mechanical. They have helped us build out the mechanical system, and then the architect has now taken that and modeled that in the framing package. Now that she has a 3D model, now we can model all the ductwork, we can model all of our piping, we can model the plumbing. All of this stuff is being modeled in the structural model, so we're not having to figure out where we have to move floor joists in the field for a toilet, or how do we get the ductwork from this joist bay to that joist bay. It's all being figured out ahead of time, so we can then take that and give it to our HVAC contractor. Not only can we get an accurate price on it, but they have an accurate understanding of how it's going to go in on the field. Now, realistically, that should give them the opportunity to pre-make all the ductwork, eliminate the use of flexible ductwork, and minimize the use of flexible ductwork, because all of that stuff can be pre-made if it needs to be custom, or they can source it if it's standard stuff. But it's all thought out, and you're eliminating this mentality of getting on site and figuring it out for the first time, because what happens there when you're doing it on site, it's left up to the person that is installing it at that moment. Where the flip side of the way we're approaching it now is that there's multiple people looking at it. We're all working together, coordinating it, and making sure that we're doing the very best, or getting the very best result, because multiple people are looking at it, rather than just the one guy or girl that might be installing the ductwork that day, and they're left up to getting it done. And they might be pressured by their boss saying, you have 2 days to get this place roughed. And they come on site and they say, I'm just going to run everything in flexible duct because I don't have the time necessary. Where it's like, well, no, we've done the work, we've coordinated it. Here's the plan, and you can prep everything ahead of time. So when you're on site, we can be super efficient. So going back to what I said at the very beginning, good design, good architecture, it really comes back down to really thinking this stuff through and being more thoughtful, especially in pre-construction, and spending the time to properly coordinate the job. And you're going to hear me talk about this a lot more. You're going to watch our projects become a lot more complex, and the use of specialty trades is going to become more and more relevant, because because projects are getting more complex, and we want to be doing more complex jobs. And the only way to do that, to take a complex job from good to great, is to spend the time and thinking through the details up front. So we're approaching this more thoughtfully, with a team mentality, rather than relying on people that might not feel comfortable or have outside pressures of getting something done in a particular amount of time. We can work together as a team to plan for and net that end result. So guys, I hope you appreciated this conversation. I love chatting with you guys every week. Make sure you stay tuned for another episode of Site Visit and Revealed on our YouTube channel. And if you're liking this podcast, drop us a review down below. Make sure you subscribe, and hit me up on Instagram at Nick Schiffer, and let me know what you'd like to dig into in the future. Cheers.